Hello, and welcome to the Digital CxO podcast. I'm Amanda Razani, and I'm excited to be here today with Fredrik Nilsson. He is the VP of Americas for Access Communications. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Amanda. Thanks for having me here today from beautiful Boston, Massachusetts.
Wonderful. Happy to have you on our show. So, can you share a little bit about Access Communications? What services do you provide?
Absolutely. So, Access Communications, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And back in 1996, we invented the world's first IP-based camera that later made us focus on the security surveillance market. And since 2013-ish, we are the global and America's #1 provider of video surveillance and security, and has continued to grow since then, and also launched other services and products such as IP-based audio, IP-based access control, and IP-based intercom, and grown to be a $1.7 billion global company and that enjoys partnership and customers with a lot of the large Fortune 50 500s here in the Americas. If you're not in this space, you probably never heard about us. If you're in this space, you're going to start looking at security and surveillance cameras everywhere and see our little brand there.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your success. So, video surveillance has come a long way. It's been quite the evolution. So, can you maybe share a little bit about the beginning of video surveillance to where we are now?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it can be divided up in a couple of distinct phases. It really started off predominantly in the banking and casino space that needed video surveillance back in the 80s and early 90s, where there was typically analog cameras with limited resolution and a lot of other limitations as well connected to a VCR. The VCRs that we all used to have at home, at least old people like myself used to have at home for viewing videos and movies and so forth. A little bit later, end of the 90s, it started to move over to digital recording called DVR, digital video recorders, still connecting to those analog cameras. The next trend, which was, as I mentioned before, innovated by Axis with the world's first IP camera, was to put all the intelligence and all the compressions out to the edge, sort of an IoT device, and do it there and then stream it over the internet to record on a server that could be located at the facility or somewhere else as well, to provide a lot of benefits when it comes to the scalability of the system and so forth. And that was kind of the fourth phase of video surveillance that was happening from mid 2000s to 2015. Most system was kind of phased over to digital or IP-based cameras from the analog ones. And the next phase we have today is the recording solution, and video management solutions are more and more moving over from on-prem onto the cloud based on great compression and so forth. So that is kind of the phase we're now. A lot of recordings, a lot of video management is still on-premise, but it's more and more for some businesses and application like schools and smaller retailers started to move into the cloud. And then what we're excited about for the future, which we can chat a little bit later, is the ability to do more with that video, i.e. using it with analytics or AI. So instead of doing forensics on recorded video, to be more proactive and intentional with how the video is used, both for security surveillance as well as business intelligence for different businesses. So that's kind of how the industry has progressed. And I think we've all seen on TV, or sometimes when a child has been abducted, you see grainy video from a gas station. That's really the old system. That's not what they look today. And then you've seen the other movies, the CSI type, where they zoom in indefinitely on a picture from anywhere in the world. That's the other reality that doesn't exist. We're somewhere in the middle in the video security industry today.
That's interesting that you shared that. So that other reality isn't, we aren't quite there yet.
It's getting, I wouldn't say close, depends on what you look at, but it's getting really a lot better and accelerating over the last couple of years. If you look over the innovations over the years, I talked about the IP and putting everything on the edge, kind of an IoT approach that started some 20 years ago. One driving technology in the early days was power over Ethernet, which meant that you need one cable to each of the cameras. Instead of power in the video cable, you can use one and attach it anywhere in the building and easily route it back to the server room. The other ones over the year was better and better compression. There was compression, the advent of H.264, a consumer-grade compression that we started to use in the 2008, 2009. And then a couple of years later, we implemented something we call Zipstream, which is really compressing it even harder because security cameras generate a lot of video. And with that, we could start increase resolution without overloading the network or overloading the servers with video recorder. And as we started to do that, we've actually come all the way from the early analog cameras that was 0.4 megapixel to the latest camera we just launched a couple of months ago. It's 41 megapixel. And just as a reference, you can have a large open air stadium and you can zoom in on the other side of the stands and see people clearly and the color of the clothing and what kind of hat they have on and those kind of things. So while we're not 100% there, the improvements over the last 10 years have been immense in this space as well when it comes to quality and what we can do with the systems.
So, what else needs to be done to have that sort of born movie type, completely world connected surveillance where you can just zero in all over the world? What else is needed there?
So we need more cameras and we're happy to provide them. But joking apart, there's a lot of cameras. If you look in the United States, I saw a number that there's close to 100 million cameras. We're 330 million people here. But I think the key thing that we need is we talked about how the cameras have better resolution. They also have better light sensitivity today because in a lot of areas, when it's dark at night, a lot of the bad guys happen to do things when it's dark because they think they're covered by that. The cameras, there was also an innovation that we came out with 6, 7, 8 years ago called Light Finder, where basically even when it's pitch dark and you and I can't necessarily see, the camera can see because it has this extremely low light sensitivity with the sensor and how we process the video. So you can see things at night. So that is also getting us closer to the born kind of CSI perception of what cameras can do. The next thing as well is to have the ability to use the video for something, to have the cameras be more intelligent as well. We say now the cameras can see better than the human eye. Now, how do we make them be smarter than the human brain? And of course, it won't keep up with all our lovely intelligence, but when it comes to certain things like detecting objects, detecting cars, detecting colors of cars, license plates, they're really becoming very, very accurate and very good. And if you think about the 100 million cameras, one of the challenges, who's going to look at all this video? And most of the video that is recorded today is just thrown away 30 days later. I would guess 99.5, 99.9% is just thrown away. It's backed up if something happens. But if that video can be used for being more proactive for security and surveillance, and even better, if it can also be used for business operations, for retailers, for airports, for logistics companies, for data centers, now all of a sudden, all those cameras are providing a lot more value for the users of them and can take over some of the mundane and repetitive tasks that we have humans doing today. So I think that's really the next progression of video security surveillance that we see now and that we see happen quite rapidly since the advent of deep learning processing all the way out in the edge, which only really happened 2, 3 years ago.
The other question I have is, do you think we ever will actually have that fully connected type of system? And if so, are there some regulations needed with that when we talk about privacy concerns and things like that?
That is a great question. First of all, I think it's important to think about privacy and regulation and ethical use of video security and video surveillance. And when we talk about AI, there is something that came out of Europe earlier this year called the EU AI Act, how AI can be used and not used, which we really like because they, instead of looking at different technologies and say facial recognition cannot be used, they look at different use cases instead and say There is low risk, medium risk, and high risk applications. So when you and I go through the customs control at the US airport, and if you're signed up with the global entry, you volunteer that biometric information to the US customs, which they have anyway because you have the picture in the passport. You can get in without showing any papers because they recognize you. They might need the fingerprints as well, but typically just with the face. We all enjoy that and like that. When it comes to social scoring in a city surveillance applications where they monitor people's faces and see who is jaywalking over the crosswalks and then find you directly without anyone being there, we don't necessarily love those applications, which happens in some countries. So I think there's a lot of regulation in that space that all serious vendors need to comply to. There's also, when we talk about AI, which is really improving very, very quickly, as you know, also with the Gen I applications, but also when it comes to image recognition. We need to be careful how, or anyone who's implementing those solutions need to be careful how the video and how the algorithms and how the models are being trained, what data they're being trained on. And there are some cases where companies have not followed the policy of how they can train the video, and they've been fined, tens of millions of dollars by the government because they're not using it in an ethical way. And then to your question as well, when it comes to privacy, that's of course something that there is regulation. The regulation chain is different between different countries. And it's also the expectations of being surveilled or not surveilled. If you go into a retail store, there's an expectations of having surveillance cameras. If you go into a casino, there's an expectations of being surveilled. If you go into a bathroom or a changing room, there's expectation of not being surveilled as well. So there's some level of privacy to cut things in a simple way. I think in general, also when it comes to privacy, as much as we all love privacy, as long as you trust the other side at doing the security and surveillance, if that's the city of Boston or the state of Texas or an airport, I don't think most people are concerned. I've seen surveys when they ask people understanding what video security and surveillance can do today, how many people accept that they're out in the public space, and it's typically in the high 70s and 80s of people having the expectation and accepted that it's there because it has more benefits than not. But of course, we all cared about the privacy as well, and there are regulations around that.
When we look to cameras as a solution, I do have another question about the integrity of the actual technology. How safe are the cameras, and how costly is it to keep the cameras in good condition and actively working properly?
That is another great question, and that kind of ties into both having the camera working properly and the developments happening very fast today when it comes to the capabilities of the cameras, both when it comes to the resolution and the image quality, but most importantly when it comes to the analytics or AI that we can do in the cameras today. But then also when it comes to cybersecurity, and if you think about the large airport with 5,000 cameras, or a retailer with 1,000 locations and 40 cameras in each location, you do the math, this might be the highest vulnerability from a cybersecurity perspective that they have of any technology implemented. And as we come from an industry that are used to implementing a closed off system with an analog network to the IP world, it's important that we spend a lot of time and effort to educate the both installers and integrators, as well as the end customer, how important it is to look at this from a cybersecurity perspective. And with a lot of equipment, there is a policy on the IT side to update those every 5 years because of technology and software support. That is not yet happening in the security industry, and I think it has to get there to be able to fully say these are cyber secure, because they do get updated every 5 years and have the latest software, latest firmware, and a hardware that can cope with the latest patches as well from a cyber perspective. Not saying they're not cyber secure, but often they need to be on a closed off network behind the firewall because of these limitations. And if you really want to use the full advantages of the cloud and AI, we need to tie them into larger systems, and also making sure they're updated for cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Well, if there was one key takeaway you could leave our audience with today, what would that be?
I think the key takeaways, and I can choose two just because of that, is that cameras are basically everywhere today. They're really providing great value for the users and also the patrons of, or the customers of the retails and airports in running those operations very, very effectively. And also, those cameras and security systems are going from being relatively dumb cameras that you can look at the video after the fact to be very smart IoT devices that can do a lot of things to provide more efficient operations and more enjoyable environments for the customers and patrons of those facilities.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you for coming on our show and sharing your insights with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Amanda.
All right, and thank you to our audience. Stay tuned, there's more.